She was kicked out for being blind, but the Mafia boss said, "She's mine now." A talented pianist, evicted from her home with nowhere to go, accidentally overhears a violent interrogation at her friend's workplace. When rival hitmen attack, the cold-blooded crime lord shields her with his own body, then declares to his stunned men, "Anyone touches her, they answer to me." Forced into his world of luxury and danger, she discovers a shocking truth. He's the one who ordered her eviction in the first place. But as gunfire and betrayal surround them, her heightened senses reveal something no one expected. Her blindness lets her see what others miss, including the wounded soul behind his ruthless facade. What no one knows? The blind woman who can identify killers by voice alone might be his greatest weakness, or his only salvation. Will her gift of true sight heal the man who can murder without remorse, or will the dark forces hunting them both destroy everything they never expected to find? The morning sun warmed Arya's face as her fingers traced the familiar path along her kitchen counter. 1, 2, 3 steps to the coffee maker. The rich aroma of fresh brew filled her nostrils as she reached for her favorite mug, the one with the chip on the rim that helped her orient it perfectly. 27 years of life, 15 without sight, had taught her precision in movement. Her apartment might be modest, but it was her sanctuary, mapped in her mind down to the smallest detail. "Good morning, Mozart," she called to her cat, hearing the soft pad of paws across hardwood floors. The steady ticking of her clock told her she had 40 minutes until her first student arrived. The sharp rap at her door made Mozart hiss. Wrong timing. Her students never came this early. "Miss Blackwood?" A man's voice, unfamiliar and businesslike. "Building management, need to speak with you." Arya's fingers tightened around her mug as she made her way to the door, counting steps she knew by heart. The lock clicked and the hinges creaked. She'd been meaning to oil them. "I have some difficult news." Paper rustled. "The building has been purchased by Costello Development Group. They're planning luxury condos here, and we're serving all tenants with eviction notices." The coffee mug nearly slipped from her grasp. "What? But I've lived here for 5 years. There must be some mistake." "No mistake. You have 48 hours to vacate." 48 hours? Arya's voice cracked. "That's impossible. I need more time. Do you know how hard it is to find accessible housing on short notice?" "I'm sorry, but the demolition crews are scheduled. Everyone has to be out." The door closed with finality, leaving Arya standing in her entryway, coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. Mozart wound between her legs, meowing softly. The rest of her morning passed in a blur of canceled lessons and frantic phone calls. Each conversation ended the same way. No vacancies, waiting lists months long, or rents far beyond her means. By afternoon, her throat was raw from explaining her situation to dozens of landlords and rental agents. "I'm a reliable tenant," she repeated for the 20th time. "I teach piano. I perform regularly." "Sorry, we're not set up for handicapped tenants." "I'm not handicapped, I'm blind," Arya snapped, but the line had already gone dead. The packing was the worst part. Each item had its place, its purpose, its memory attached. She could pack her clothes, her books in Braille, her basic necessities, but her piano, her beautiful upright Yamaha that had been her companion through countless hours of practice and teaching. Arya ran her hands over the smooth wood, fingers finding every familiar scratch and dent. This piano had been her lifeline after the accident, helping her rebuild her world note by note when everything else had gone dark. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, playing a soft chord. The sound resonated through the emptying apartment, bringing tears to her eyes. The storage company arrived late afternoon. She directed them with precise instructions, making sure her boxes were labeled in Braille. But the piano would have to stay. No storage unit in her budget could accommodate it, and she had nowhere else to take it. As evening settled, Arya stood in her hollow apartment, listening to the echoes of her footsteps. Everything she could keep was in one suitcase beside her, her whole life reduced to so little. She pulled out her phone, pressing the familiar speed dial. "Mia, it's Arya. I need help." 20 minutes later, she stood on her friend's doorstep, white cane in one hand, suitcase in the other. The door opened, bringing the smell of pasta sauce and the sound of Mia's concerned intake of breath. "Oh, honey," Mia said softly. "Come in. Tell me everything." Arya's composure finally broke. "Could I stay? Just for a few days, until I find something new. I don't know where else to go." Hours later, curled up on Mia's couch with a borrowed blanket, Arya listened to the unfamiliar creaks and sounds of her friend's apartment. Mozart had been temporarily rehomed with the student's family, another piece of her life scattered to the winds. She thought of her piano standing alone in her empty apartment. Tomorrow, it would probably be taken away as trash, its music silenced, just like her life had been upended by a corporation's decision implemented through an impersonal notice and an unsympathetic messenger. Sleep eluded her as she tried to map this new space in her mind. The coffee maker was 6 steps from the couch, the bathroom door had a squeak, and somewhere outside, a neon sign buzzed incessantly. Not home, nothing like home. Her phone's automated voice told her it was 3 a.m. In less than 2 days, she had lost almost everything she had spent years building. Her safe space, her independence, her ability to teach from home. All gone because Costello Development Group needed more luxury condos in their portfolio. Arya pulled the blanket tighter around herself, trying to find comfort in its softness. She had survived losing her sight, losing her parents, losing her dreams of being a concert pianist. She would survive this too. But in the dark hours of early morning, that knowledge didn't make the ache in her chest any easier to bear. The neon sign continued its relentless buzz, a harsh urban lullaby so different from the gentle quiet of her old apartment. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and the unfamiliar ceiling fan above her clicked with each rotation. Every sound reminded her that she was adrift, displaced, dependent on the kindness of others once again. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar windows, but Arya's world remained dark as always. The pull-out couch creaked beneath her as she sat up, momentarily disoriented by the strange echoes and scents around her. No smell of Mozart's cat food, no familiar hum of her refrigerator, no gentle ticking of her beloved grandfather clock. "Morning, sweetie," Mia called from what sounded like a tiny kitchen. "Coffee's ready if you want some." Arya unfolded her white cane and carefully counted steps to where dishes clinked against a countertop. The space was cramped, she could tell by the way sounds bounced off close walls. "Thanks for letting me crash here." "Of course," Mia guided Arya's hand to a warm mug. "But listen, my place is really small, and I work pretty crazy hours at Bellissimo, evening shifts mostly." "I'll keep calling about apartments," Arya promised, wrapping her fingers around the coffee mug. "I just need a few days." The morning passed in a blur of rejection. Each phone call ended the same way. Either the rent was astronomical or the landlords balked at renting to a blind tenant. By afternoon, Arya's shoulders slumped with defeat as she sat on Mia's worn couch, phone in her lap. "Any luck?" Mia asked, the rustle of fabric suggesting she was changing into her work uniform. "Nothing." Arya rubbed her temples. "One place wanted 3 months' rent as a deposit because they considered me high risk." "That's ridiculous!" Mia's footsteps crossed the room. "Listen, why don't you come with me to the restaurant tonight? The break room's comfortable, and it's better than sitting here alone. We can look for places online after my shift." Arya hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "It's no trouble. Bellissimo's super fancy. The break room's nicer than my apartment." An hour later, Arya found herself carefully navigating through what felt like an expansive space, her cane detecting plush carpeting and expensive furniture. The restaurant hummed with activity, crystal glasses clinking, muted conversations, and the subtle whoosh of doors swinging open and closed. But something felt off. Her heightened senses picked up undertones of tension in the staff's voices. Conversations would stop abruptly when certain patrons entered. Footsteps hurried down hallways with unusual urgency. Back doors opened and closed with surprising frequency for a dining establishment. "The break room's through here," Mia guided her down a corridor. "Bathroom's right across the hall if you need it." The break room was indeed comfortable. Arya's exploring hands found a plush couch and what felt like a decent coffee maker. But what caught her attention was the wall she shared with what seemed to be an adjacent office. Male voices filtered through, speaking in carefully measured tones that didn't match typical restaurant management discussions. "I'll check on you soon," Mia promised. "Just need to clock in and—" Her words were cut off by another server calling her name urgently. "Emergency staff meeting. Sorry, I'll be right back." Arya heard the door close behind her friend, leaving her alone with the muffled voices from next door growing more distinct. The men spoke in clipped tones about territories and percentages, definitely not restaurant business. She sat perfectly still, her trained musician's ear unconsciously analyzing the vocal patterns through the wall. 4, maybe 5 distinct voices, all carrying the weight of authority. One voice in particular commanded attention when it spoke, causing others to fall silent. The sounds of the restaurant seemed distant now, like background music to the tension-filled conversation happening feet away from her. Years of compensating for her blindness had taught Arya to read atmospheres through sound, and everything about this situation raised alarm bells in her mind. A door banged somewhere down the hall, followed by hurried footsteps and whispered conversations. The staff meeting Mia had been called to seemed to be generating its own undercurrent of anxiety, evident in the quick, nervous footsteps passing by the break room. Arya's fingers found her phone, checking the time. 15 minutes had passed since Mia left. The voices next door grew more intense, though they maintained their careful volume. Words like shipment and schedule drifted through the wall, stripped of context, but heavy with implication. She considered texting Mia, but decided against it. Her friend was probably busy with whatever restaurant emergency had prompted the staff meeting. Instead, Arya focused on creating a mental map of her surroundings, a habit that had helped her navigate life since losing her sight. The break room was approximately 12 feet square, with the shared wall to her right. The door Mia had led her through was directly opposite. The couch she sat on was against the left wall, and a small kitchenette area occupied the far corner. Every few minutes, footsteps would pass in the hallway, some hurried, others measured and deliberate. A burst of laughter from the adjacent office made her jump slightly. It wasn't friendly laughter. It carried an edge that made her skin prickle. The commanding voice spoke again, lower this time, and the laughter cut off, abruptly. Time seemed to stretch as Arya sat alone in the break room, surrounded by the subtle signs that Bellissimo was more than just an upscale restaurant. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of establishment her friend worked for, and what sort of meeting was happening just beyond that wall. The clock on Arya's phone announced it was nearly midnight. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since breakfast. Hours had passed, and still no sign of Mia. The break room's initial comfort had given way to restless anxiety. Rising carefully, she oriented herself using the wall. "Mia?" she called softly, stepping into the hallway. The restaurant's earlier bustle had quieted, but voices echoed from somewhere ahead. Angry, raised voices that made her pause. She turned away from the sound, her cane sweeping the carpeted floor. The corridor seemed different, wider, with fewer doors. This wasn't the way they'd come. The voices grew louder as she tried to backtrack, then a crash of something heavy hitting wood made her jump. "The shipments were supposed to be weekly." The deep voice from earlier carried through a partially open door just ahead. Something about its controlled fury made Arya's skin prickle. "So, explain to me why 3 weeks have passed without a single delivery." "Mr. Costello, please!" Another voice, trembling. "The police increased patrols after—" A sharp crack interrupted the plea, followed by a pained gasp. "The police!" The deep voice, Costello's, dropped lower, more dangerous. "Or did someone offer you better terms? The Moretti family, perhaps?" Arya stood frozen, her heart thundering. She shouldn't be hearing this. Names, delivery schedules, dollar amounts. Information that meant nothing to her, but clearly meant everything to these men, filtered through the gap in the door. Another crash, another cry of pain. 20% of each shipment, the trembling voice confessed. "They threatened my family." "Your family was protected under our arrangement." Costello's tone carried death in its quietness. "Now they'll have neither our protection nor Moretti's promises." Arya's fingers tightened around her cane. She had to get out of here. Carefully, she began to retreat, counting steps. 1, 2. Her cane caught something metal. A rolling service cart crashed into the wall, sending glasses shattering across the floor. The corridor fell deadly silent. Heavy footsteps approached. Before she could move, steel-strong fingers wrapped around her upper arm. The grip wasn't crushing, but its promise of power sent tremors through her body. "What do we have here?" Costello's voice came from directly above her. Heat radiated from his proximity, along with an expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the metallic scent of blood. "Boss, she must have heard everything," another man spoke urgently. "We should take care of—" "Quiet." The single word carried absolute authority. Fingers touched Arya's chin, tilting her face up. Though she couldn't see him, she felt Costello's intense scrutiny. "Who are you?" Arya straightened her spine, turning her unseeing eyes toward his voice. "Arya Blackwood. I was waiting for my friend Mia." "The waitress," a different voice asked. "She's working tonight?" Interesting that Mia didn't mention bringing a guest. Costello's tone suggested this oversight would have consequences. "How much did you hear?" "Everything," Arya admitted. No point lying when the truth was obvious. "Though I understand nothing of its context, and I have no interest in understanding." a low chuckle, surprisingly genuine. Most people would beg at this point. Would begging change anything? His grip on her arm tightened fractionally. No. Then I'll keep my dignity, if it's all the same to you. Silence stretched between them. Arya forced herself to breathe evenly, though her pulse raced. The air felt charged with potential violence, yet something else too. A curious tension in the way Costello continued studying her. You're blind. It wasn't a question. Obviously. Yet you found your way to this particular corridor. I got lost, Arya said, though I'm starting to think that's the least of my problems. Another chuckle, darker this time. You have no idea. His thumb brushed her cheek, the gesture almost gentle despite its implied threat. What should I do with you, Arya Blackwood? Boss, that urgent voice interrupted again. We can't risk... I said quiet. Costello's command cut through the air like a blade. Tell me, Ms. Blackwood, what would you do in my position? Arya considered carefully. Logically, you have 3 options. Kill me, which seems excessive given my inability to identify anyone visually. Buy my silence, which we both know offers no real guarantee. Or... She paused. Or recognize that someone who navigates life without sight develops other ways of understanding truth from lies. That could be valuable in certain contexts. His hand moved from her cheek to her throat, not squeezing but resting there like a reminder. Are you offering to work for me? I'm suggesting that unnecessary violence would be a waste of potential resources. The corridor held its breath. Arya could sense other men waiting for Costello's decision could feel the weight of his consideration in his unmoving hand against her throat. Finally, he released her. Vincent? Yes, boss. A new voice, steady and professional. Escort Ms. Blackwood back to the break room. See that she's comfortable. Costello stepped back, his presence no less commanding with distance. Then find out everything about our blind guest. Everything. Of course, boss. A different hand took Arya's elbow, firm but not cruel. As Vincent led her away, she heard the interrogation room's door close behind them, sealing away whatever fate awaited the man who'd betrayed Costello's trust. The break room felt different when they reached it. No longer a simple waiting area, but a cage, albeit a gilded one. Vincent guided her to the couch, then moved to stand by the door. Would you like some water? He asked, surprisingly courteous. Arya nodded, her throat dry from more than thirst. As she sipped from the glass he brought, she wondered if she'd just saved her life or signed it away to something far more complicated than death. Dawn's first light crept through Bellissimo's windows, painting shadows across empty tables. Arya sat rigidly in the break room, her fingers tracing the worn fabric of the couch she'd been confined to for hours. Vincent had remained a silent sentinel through the night, his presence both reassuring and imprisoning. The staff entrance clicked open, followed by Mia's familiar footsteps rushing across the tile floor. Oh God, Arya! Mia's voice cracked with panic. I just heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I never should have brought you here. You know who they are. It wasn't a question. Mia's breath hitched. The Costellos. Dominic Costello runs everything in this part of the city. The restaurant, real estate, shipping. She lowered her voice. And things better left unmentioned. Like the man being interrogated last night? Please, Mia whispered. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. The less you know. A deafening crack split the air. Arya flinched as more shots followed, accompanied by screams and shattering glass from the main dining room. Get down, Vincent commanded, his professional demeanor shifting to lethal alertness. Mia grabbed Arya's arm, pulling her behind the break room's metal desk. The cacophony of violence grew closer, running footsteps, shouted orders, more gunfire. Arya's heightened senses caught fragments of chaos. The metallic slide of weapons being drawn, bodies hitting the floor, Italian curses spat between shots. Salvatore's men, Mia explained shakily. They've been trying to take Costello territory for months. The break room door burst open. Arya tensed, but Vincent's calm voice said, Boss. Where is she? Dominic's deep tone carried over the mayhem. Before anyone could answer, another spray of bullets tore through the wall. In one fluid motion, Dominic crossed the room and covered Arya's body with his own, pressing her against the desk's metal side. His cologne surrounded her, sandalwood and amber, mixed now with cordite. His heart beat steadily against her back, his breathing controlled despite the danger. Stay down, he ordered, his lips brushing her ear. The intimate gesture contrasted sharply with the violence of his next actions. He shifted, arm extending past her. 3 precise shots rang out, followed by a heavy thud in the doorway. Arya couldn't see the body fall, but she felt Dominic's satisfied exhale. More shooting, more shouts. Dominic remained coiled around her, one arm holding her secure, while the other maintained his defensive position. His body radiated heat and barely contained power, like a predator ready to strike. "Clear!" a voice finally called. "4 Salvatore soldiers down, boss. 2 more ran." "Sweep the perimeter," Dominic commanded, not yet releasing Arya. "Check the cameras. I want to know how they got past our security." The chaos slowly settled into controlled aftermath. Dominic finally moved, helping Arya to her feet, but keeping one hand on her waist. She could sense others gathering, the whisper of expensive suits, the subtle movements of armed men awaiting orders. "The blind woman, boss," someone said carefully. She's witnessed nothing she can report," Dominic cut in. "But she's heard enough to identify voices. Salvatore's men, my operations, our security protocols." His grip tightened possessively. "And now she's a liability on the streets. How long before our enemies realize she could recognize them by voice alone?" Arya stiffened. "I want no part of this." "That choice disappeared the moment you wandered down that hallway last night." Dominic's tone softened marginally. "But I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours," she protested. His laugh held no humor. "You are now." His voice rose, addressing his men. "She's mine. Anyone touches her, they answer to me. Vincent, have the penthouse prepared." "You can't just," Arya started. "I can. I will." His thumb traced her jawline, a gesture both threatening and oddly tender. "Consider it protection, Miss Blackwood. These streets aren't safe for someone with your unique abilities." Hours later, Arya stood in Dominic's private elevator, Vincent beside her. Her small suitcase from Mia's apartment had been retrieved, a pitiful collection of possessions for what was beginning to feel like an indefinite stay. The elevator purred upward, each floor taking her further from freedom. She could smell leather and polished wood, wealth embedded in every surface. Vincent remained respectfully quiet, but his presence reminded her that she was now under constant surveillance. "Does he always take such personal interest in protecting witnesses?" she asked finally. "Mr. Costello has never done anything like this before," Vincent answered carefully. "But then he's never met anyone quite like you." The elevator continued its smooth ascent, carrying Arya toward a gilded cage, while somewhere below, Dominic Costello dealt with the bloody aftermath of the morning's attack. Her fingers clutched her folded cane, its familiar texture the only constant in a world that had spiraled beyond her control in less than 24 hours. She thought of Dominic's heartbeat against her back, steady in the midst of gunfire, his cologne lingering on her clothes, marking her as claimed, his voice shifting between deadly authority and that strange gentleness reserved only for her. The elevator chimed softly. Vincent touched her elbow, guiding her forward into what would become her new prison, or sanctuary, depending on how one viewed protection from a man like Dominic Costello. The penthouse stretched, out like a labyrinth of luxury. Arya's fingers trailed along smooth marble countertops and plush velvet furnishings as she carefully mapped her new prison. The space echoed with vastness, high ceilings, wide corridors, rooms that seemed to flow endlessly into one another. "Careful there, Kara," Mrs. Russo's warm voice guided her away from a delicate vase. "Let me show you the kitchen first. You might want tea later." The elderly housekeeper's footsteps were soft, hesitant. Her hands trembled slightly when helping Arya, betraying her fear of making mistakes in Dominic's domain. "How long have you worked for Mr. Costello?" Arya asked, counting steps between the kitchen island and refrigerator. 20 years, since his father's time," Mrs. Russo's voice dropped. "The family has always been good to me." The underlying message was clear, loyalty bought through a mixture of generosity and fear. Arya discovered a grand piano in what Mrs. Russo called the music room, its keys pristine under her touch. She played a few notes, the acoustics perfect in the vast space. "Security cameras in every room except private bathrooms," Mrs. Russo mentioned casually. "Armed guards at all exits. The elevator needs a special key." Message received. Don't try running. Hours later, Arya had created a mental blueprint of her gilded cage. She was sitting in the living room, fingers tracing patterns on a leather armchair, when the elevator hummed to life. Dominic's footsteps were distinctive, measured, confident, demanding attention without effort. His cologne preceded him. "Settling in?" His deep voice held amusement. "Do prisoners get a choice?" "You're not a prisoner. You're under protection. Protected people can leave when they choose." He moved closer, his presence filling the space. Intelligence and spirit, Fascinating combination. Why didn't you just kill me? The question had burned since morning, a low chuckle. Maybe I like interesting things in my life. His words sent an unwanted shiver down her spine. The next morning, Arya sat at the kitchen island while Mrs. Russo prepared breakfast and read the newspaper, a routine Dominic had apparently instructed to keep his guest informed. Costello Development Group begins downtown renewal project, Mrs. Russo read. Historic Hamilton building to be demolished for luxury condos. Arya's hands froze around her coffee cup. That's my building. Mrs. Russo's sudden silence confirmed it. All day, anger simmered beneath Arya's careful composure. When Dominic returned that evening, she was waiting. You're behind my eviction. She stood as he entered, facing his direction. Your development group is destroying my home. Business is business. His tone remained neutral. That building was acquired legally. Legal doesn't mean right. Right and wrong are luxuries in my world. He moved closer. The Costello family has interests everywhere. Construction, real estate, shipping, private security. Some legitimate, some not. All profitable. And people's lives are just collateral damage. In my experience, everyone's life is collateral damage to someone else's ambitions. His honesty was brutal. At least I'm direct about it. The conversation revealed the true scope of his power. A criminal empire masked by legitimate businesses, all controlled with the same cold efficiency. That night, Arya waited until the penthouse grew quiet. She had counted steps, memorized turns, noted when guard shifts changed. The service elevator would be less monitored. She made it to the lobby before strong hands grabbed her arms. Ms. Blackwood! The guard's voice was apologetic but firm. Mr. Costello wants you returned upstairs. The elevator ride back up was tense. Dominic waited in silence until the doors closed. That was foolish. His voice had lost all warmth. I want my life back. Your old life ended the moment you heard things you shouldn't have. He gripped her arm, not painfully but inescapably. You belong to my world now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. I don't belong to anyone. You do now. His thumb brushed her pulse point. And I protect what's mine, whether they want it or not. He guided her back inside, his touch a reminder of power held carefully in check. The penthouse door closed with finality, sealing Arya into a world where right and wrong blurred, where protection and possession were the same thing, and where a man like Dominic Costello could reshape reality with a word. Mrs. Russo was waiting with tea, her movements anxious as she served them both. The familiar ritual felt surreal against the backdrop of implied threats and thwarted escape. The blue bedroom suite is prepared, she murmured. Show Ms. Blackwood to her rooms, Dominic ordered, and have Vincent arrange for additional security measures tomorrow. Arya stood, chin high, despite her defeat. Will there be bars on the windows? Don't be dramatic, his voice followed her down the hallway. The windows are already bulletproof. I just need to ensure you don't try anything foolish again. Mrs. Russo's gentle hand guided her into a space that smelled of fresh linens and luxury. The door closed softly, leaving Arya alone with the knowledge that her cage, however gilded, had just become more secure. She traced the window's smooth surface, feeling the thickness of glass designed to stop bullets. Somewhere in the city below, her old apartment building awaited demolition. One small casualty in the empire of a man who had decided she now belonged to him. The gentle morning sun warmed Arya's face as unfamiliar voices and heavy footsteps broke the penthouse's silence. She emerged from her room, following the sounds of men grunting under the weight of something substantial. Careful with that corner, a familiar voice commanded. Dominic. My piano? Arya whispered, recognizing the distinctive scrape of its legs. From your storage unit, Dominic confirmed. Closer now. Consider it a peace offering. I don't understand. Her fingers found the piano's smooth surface, tracing its familiar scratches and imperfections. You're the reason I lost my home, but you bring me this. I won't apologize for business decisions, he said matter-of-factly, but I can make your stay here more comfortable. The delivery men departed, leaving them alone with the instrument. Arya's hands traveled over the keys, finding middle C. The note rang clear, they'd kept it tuned. You had it maintained. Of course. His voice held a hint of pride. I don't do things halfway. Over the next 3 days, Arya established a routine that centered around the piano. Hours slipped by as she played everything from Bach to Beethoven, losing herself in the music that had always been her sanctuary. She pretended not to notice Dominic's presence when he stood in the doorway, his breathing changing subtly as certain pieces affected him. Mrs. Russo adapted the household schedule around Arya's playing, serving lunch later and ensuring cleaning never interrupted her practice. Even Vincent's security updates to Dominic moved to different rooms. Outside the penthouse's carefully controlled environment, other forces were at work. Mia Torres hurried out of Bellissimo's back entrance after her shift, only to find a man in a suit waiting by her car. "Miss Torres," he said, showing his badge. "Agent James Collins, FBI. We need to talk about your friend Arya Blackwood." Mia's hand trembled on her keys. "I don't know anything." "We've been investigating the Costellos for years," Collins continued. "Miss Blackwood's situation presents an unprecedented opportunity. We need someone on the inside." "Arya's blind," Mia protested. She can identify voices, conversations, patterns of movement, and she has access to Dominic Costello's private space." Collins stepped closer. "Help us convince her to cooperate, otherwise she could face accessory charges herself." "You'd charge a blind woman?" "The law doesn't discriminate based on disability, Miss Torres. Think about it." That weekend, Vincent escorted Mia up to the penthouse. Arya heard her friend's nervous energy in every movement as they sat for tea in the living room. "The place is impressive," Mia said, china clinking as her hands shook. "It's a beautiful prison," Arya replied dryly. Vincent shifted his weight by the door, a reminder of constant surveillance. "These people are dangerous, Arya." Mia's voice dropped lower. "What exactly have you heard while you're here?" "Meetings, phone calls, nothing specific." Arya chose her words carefully, noting the tension in Mia's question. "But you're alone with him sometimes? With Costello?" "Mia, are you okay? You seem nervous. Just worried about you." The reply came too quickly. "You know what they're capable of." After Mia's departure, Arya sat at the dining table with Dominic for their first peaceful meal together. The usual hostile silence had shifted into something different. "How old were you when you started playing?" he asked unexpectedly. 4. Before I lost my sight, I was performing in competitions." "The accident?" "Car crash. I was 12. Arya pushed her food around the plate. "How did you learn about classical music?" "My mother." Something softened in his voice. "She played, not like you, but she loved it." "Past tense?" "She died when I was 8. The words held old pain. Arya nodded, understanding loss. "That's why you listen every day. You knew I was there. Your cologne, your breathing, the way the floorboard creaks under your weight in the doorway." A low chuckle. "Observant. I have to be." She tilted her head. "The world doesn't adapt to blindness. We adapt to it." "How do you do it? Navigate everything?" "Memory, sound, touch." Arya demonstrated by reaching unerringly for her water glass. "Every space has its own soundtrack. This penthouse. The ventilation hums in G-sharp. The elevator cables vibrate in B-flat. Your footsteps carry the rhythm of someone used to being obeyed." "And what does that tell you about me?" "That you're dangerous," she said honestly, "but not always unkind." Later that evening, Arya sat at her piano, fingers finding the keys for Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The melancholy notes filled the penthouse, speaking what words couldn't express. She felt Dominic's presence in the doorway, his breathing synchronized with the music's rise and fall. Something was shifting between them, the captor and captive dynamic blurring into something more complex. Every shared meal, every conversation about music, every moment he listened to her play added layers to their understanding of each other. The nocturne's final notes lingered in the air. Neither spoke, both aware of the change but unwilling to acknowledge it. Arya's fingers rested on the keys, feeling the subtle vibrations fade. Dominic remained in the doorway, his silence more eloquent than words. Mrs. Russo moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's meals. Vincent's footsteps patrolled the hallway. The city hummed beyond bulletproof glass. And in the space between music and silence, predator and prey found themselves on unfamiliar ground. The days melted together in Dominic's penthouse, each one less constraining than the last. Arya found herself settling into routines that no longer felt like submission. Morning coffee with Mrs. Russo, afternoon practice sessions, evening conversations that stretched longer each night. Dominic's first surprise came on Tuesday. Tickets to the symphony. "You'll have the private box," he said. "No crowds, no stairs to navigate." Vincent drove them in a sleek car that hummed like a cat. In the box, Arya absorbed Tchaikovsky while observing the subtle dynamics around her. People whispered Dominic's name with fear and deference. He handled each interaction with minimal words, his authority requiring no volume. Thursday brought another outing, an after-hours visit to the Museum of Modern Art. "The curator's a friend," Dominic explained. "You can touch everything." Arya's fingers traced bronze curves and marble edges, building mental images more vivid than sight. She noticed how the curator's voice trembled slightly when addressing Dominic, despite his generous donation to the museum. "Why do they fear you so much?" she asked on the ride home. "Fear and respect often look similar," he replied. "One lasts longer." The following Monday evening, Arya sat in her room when voices drifted through the ventilation system. Dominic was hosting what he'd described as a business meeting in his study. "The doc numbers don't add up," a gravelly voice insisted. "Someone's skimming." "3 possible weak points," another man added. "We've narrowed it down." Arya mapped the voices, noting subtle variations in tone and stress patterns. Years of relying on sound had taught her to read the symphony of human speech. The next day, Dominic surprised her. "I need your help with something." He led her to his study, where 3 men waited. She recognized their cologne before they spoke. Doc supervisors from yesterday's meeting. "Why is she here?" one muttered. "Miss Blackwood has unique insights," Dominic said smoothly. "Please, tell us about last month's shipments." Each man gave his report. Arya listened intently, picking up what others missed. Micro tremors in vowels, stressed consonants, subtle pitch changes that betrayed inner tension. After they left, Dominic turned to her. "Well?" "The second man, Marco," his voice changed when discussing the shipments from Rotterdam. "Tiny variations in pitch, especially on numbers. He's either nervous or lying." Dominic made a thoughtful sound. "Interesting. Vincent, bring Marco back tomorrow, alone." Later that evening, Dominic found her at the piano. "You were right," Marco confessed when confronted. "500,000 skimmed over 6 months." "What will happen to him?" "He'll make restitution." Dominic's tone suggested the method wouldn't be pleasant. "How did you learn to read people so well?" "When you lose one sense, others compensate. People think being blind means missing things, but sometimes you notice more." Her fingers found a simple melody. "Everyone has patterns. Breathing, footsteps, vocal rhythms. Lying disrupts those patterns." To her surprise, Dominic sat beside her on the bench. It was the first time they'd chosen to be this close, his thigh pressed against hers, radiating warmth. "Show me," he said, nodding toward the keys. Arya positioned his hands on the keyboard, ignoring the spark when their fingers touched. "Here, C major scale, simplest pattern in music." His hands were strong but uncertain on the keys. She guided him through the notes, aware of his cologne, his steady breathing, the subtle shift as he leaned closer to watch. "Music is mathematics," she explained. "Patterns. Like your business, supply chains, profit margins, loyal employees versus traders." Her fingers brushed his as she adjusted his position. "Everything has a rhythm. Break the rhythm, and something's wrong." "Is that why I kept you?" he mused. "Because you see patterns I miss?" "You kept me because I was a liability who heard too much." "At first." His thumb grazed her wrist as he attempted the scale again. "Now you're an asset. Your blindness lets you see what others miss." The word asset shouldn't have sent warmth through her chest. She was still his captive, regardless of symphony tickets and museum visits. Yet something had shifted. The way he sought her opinion, valued her insights, chose to sit beside her now. "Try it again," she said, guiding his hands through the notes. "Feel the pattern?" They sat together at the piano, his body heat seeping into her side, his fingers occasionally brushing hers as she taught him the simple melody. The tension between them built with each accidental touch, each shared breath. Arya knew she should pull away. This man had destroyed her old life, held her captive, threatened everything she valued. Yet here she sat, teaching him piano, hyper-aware of every point where their bodies connected. The simple tune filled the penthouse, halting but determined like their strange relationship. Mrs. Russo paused in her evening routine to listen. Vincent's footsteps slowed as he passed the door. "Music changes the atmosphere of a room," Arya said softly. "Like your presence changes the rhythm of people's breathing, their pulse, their words." "And how do I change your rhythm?" Dominic asked, his voice low. Arya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her quickened heartbeat said enough. Instead, she guided his hands back to the keys, teaching him the next phrase of the melody while trying to ignore how natural it felt to sit beside him. how easily they'd fallen into this new pattern. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, unseen, but felt in the way they warmed the glass. In the kitchen, Mrs. Russo hummed along with their simple tune. Somewhere in the building, Vincent coordinated security rotations. And at the piano, captor and captive found themselves shifting into something undefined, something neither had anticipated. The morning sun cast long shadows across the penthouse as Dominic adjusted his tie. Urgent business, I'll be back tonight. His eyes lingered on Arya at the piano. Vincent will ensure your safety. She nodded, fingers continuing their dance across the keys. Over the past weeks, she'd learned to read the weight of his footsteps, the subtle shifts in his breathing that betrayed concern despite his controlled tone. After he left, Vincent maintained a discreet presence, his movements precise and professional. Arya appreciated his respect for her space, so different from her first days of captivity. The afternoon brought Mia's visit, her friend's heels clicking nervously on the marble floors. They sat in the living room, Vincent positioned by the door. "You could leave, you know," Mia said softly, stirring her tea. "There are people who could help. Protect you?" Arya's fingers tightened around her cup. "I'm fine, Mia. Are you? Living in a gilded cage with a man who's shown me more consideration than most seeing people ever have," Arya interrupted. The words surprised her with their truth. Mia shifted closer, lowering her voice. "There are ways out, deals that could be made. I don't need deals." Arya set her cup down firmly. The thought of betraying Dominic made her stomach clench, though she couldn't explain why, even to herself. After Mia left, Arya played for hours, trying to sort through her conflicted emotions. The piano had always been her refuge, but now even music reminded her of Dominic. His presence when he listened, his clumsy attempts to learn scales, the way his breathing changed when she played Chopin. She fell asleep still wondering when his protection had started feeling less like imprisonment and more like something else entirely. The security alarm jerked her awake at 2 a.m. Gunshots echoed from the lobby. Vincent burst into her room. "Salvatore's men," he said tersely, gripping her arm. "We need to move. Now." They hurried through the penthouse. Arya's bare feet, silent on the carpet, counting steps, mapping their route to the panic room she'd been shown weeks ago. More shots, closer now. Glass shattered somewhere behind them. "Inside," Vincent ordered, pushing her through the heavy door. "Lock it, don't—" Gunfire interrupted him. Arya heard him return fire, his footsteps moving away, drawing the attackers from her position. She sealed the panic room, heart pounding. The reinforced walls muffled sound, but her heightened hearing caught enough. Boots on marble, voices calling positions, the terrible rhythm of automatic weapons. A scratch at the door, someone testing the lock. Arya pressed herself into the corner, controlling her breathing like Dominic had taught her. Listen, track, identify, metal scraped against metal. They were picking the lock. She counted 3 distinct breathing patterns outside. The door opened with a hiss of hydraulics. Arya held perfectly still. Well, a rough voice said. "Boss's new pet!" A gun cocked, then chaos erupted. New footsteps, familiar ones, thundered through the penthouse. Dominic's voice cut through the noise, cold and precise. "Southwest corner, 2 targets! Vincent, take the east wing, no survivors!" The methodical elimination began. Arya tracked it through sound, Dominic's controlled breathing as he fired, bodies falling, his voice directing his men with lethal efficiency. The intruder near her fired blindly toward the door. Return fire. A wet gurgle. Silence. "Arya!" Dominic's voice cracked. His footsteps raced toward her. Hands found her in the dark. Strong hands that had ordered deaths moments ago, now trembling as they checked her for injuries. "I'm okay," she whispered. His breath hitched. One hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "When I heard they'd breached the penthouse." She turned into his touch, feeling the tremors running through his powerful frame. This was Dominic, stripped bare. No calculation, no control, just raw fear for her safety. Their lips met with desperate intensity. Arya gasped as he pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed her closer. He tasted of adrenaline and gunpowder and something uniquely him. They stumbled out of the panic room, unwilling to break contact. Dominic lifted her easily, carrying her through the penthouse while trading heated kisses. Her legs wrapped around his waist, feeling the strength coiled in his muscles. His bedroom door clicked shut behind them. He laid her on silk sheets with surprising gentleness, following her down. Their kisses turned slower, deeper, hands exploring with rising urgency. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her throat. Arya ran her fingers through his hair, feeling where it was mussed from battle, No. Clothes fell away. She mapped his body with sensitive fingers, scars from old wounds, muscles hardened by violence, skin soft despite his dangerous life. He did the same with lips and hands, learning every inch of her with focused intensity. When he finally joined them, Arya gasped at the feeling of completeness. They moved together with rising passion, her nails scoring his back while he whispered Italian endearments against her skin. Release crashed over them simultaneously. Dominic gathered her close afterward, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheeks, her lips. They lay tangled in silk sheets as dawn painted the room gold, both aware that everything had changed. His heartbeat steadied under her ear. One hand traced patterns on her bare shoulder, while the other kept her pressed against him, as if afraid she'd disappear. Sleep, he murmured, pulling the covers over them. I've got you. Arya drifted off, surrounded by his warmth, knowing she should feel conflicted about giving herself to the man who'd once been her captor. Instead, she felt only peace as his breathing synced with hers, their rhythms aligning like notes in a perfect chord. Sunlight warmed Arya's face as she stirred in unfamiliar silk sheets. Her hand reached across the empty space beside her, still holding traces of Dominic's warmth. Disoriented, she sat up, pulling the sheet around herself as footsteps approached, his distinctive stride steady and purposeful. Good morning, Dominic said, his voice carrying a gentleness she'd never heard before. I brought coffee. The rich aroma guided her hands to the offered cup. Thank you. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts about the night before. Arya sipped her perfectly prepared coffee. He'd remembered how she took it. You're thinking too loud, he said finally, the bed dipping as he sat beside her. This changes things, she replied carefully. Yes. His fingers brushed her shoulder, tracing where the sheet had slipped. But maybe they were already changing. More silence, but comfortable now. Arya felt the tension in his frame, sensing he wanted to say more. I was 8, he began suddenly, voice tight with old pain. When they came for my mother. Arya set down her coffee, turning toward him. Rival family. Middle of the night. I heard the gunshots from my room. His words came faster now, as if a dam had broken. Found her in the kitchen. She'd tried to reach the panic room. He exhaled sharply. That's why I installed one here. When I heard they'd breached the penthouse last night. Arya reached for him, finding his face. Her fingers detected the wetness on his cheeks he was trying to hide. I understand trauma, she said softly. The accident that took my sight. I remember the headlights, the crash. Sometimes I still hear the glass breaking. His hand covered hers on his face. How did you move past it? You don't, really. You just learn to carry it differently. They sat together, sharing painful truths in the morning light. When Dominic finally kissed her, it was different from the desperate passion of the night before. Tender, almost reverent. The next 3 days passed in a blur of discovery. Dominic included her in his daily routine, showing her sides of his world she hadn't glimpsed before. He took her to Obsidian, his upscale nightclub, during quiet daytime hours. There's a Steinway on the stage, he said, leading her through the empty club. Thought you might like to try it. Her fingers found polished keys, drawing out a few experimental notes. The acoustics were magnificent. She began to play, losing herself in the music until applause startled her. The lunch staff stopped to listen, Dominic explained, pride evident in his voice. You could perform here if you wanted. The regular pianist only works weekends. You'd trust me with that kind of freedom? I trust you with more than that. He settled beside her on the bench. Let me show you something. He spread out papers, contracts, deeds, business licenses. As she ran her fingers over the embossed letterheads, he explained his family's complex empire. Restaurants, nightclubs, real estate development, all legitimate. The import-export business straddles both worlds. His tone turned serious. Thousands of people depend on us for their livelihoods, not just the organization, but regular working people, waiters, construction crews, dock workers. It's a heavy responsibility, Arya observed. My father's stroke left me in charge at 25, had to learn fast. He shuffled the papers. The criminal enterprises fund the legitimate ones which provide cover and employment. It's a delicate balance. That evening, they dined alone in Obsidian after closing. Dominic had the chef prepare her favorite pasta while he explained more about his world, the complex alliances, the constant vigilance required to maintain peace between families. A phone call interrupted their meal. Dominic's voice turned cold as he listened, tension radiating from him. "Double the patrols," he ordered. "I want eyes on every Salvatore property." He hung up, immediately pulling Arya's chair closer to his. "What is it?" she asked. "They're moving shipments through our territory without permission." His arm wrapped around her possessively, testing boundaries after their failed attack. His lips brushed her ear as he whispered, "I won't let anyone hurt what's mine." Once, those words would have frightened her. Now they sent a different kind of shiver through her body. She turned her face toward his, finding his mouth unerringly. The kiss deepened until a discreet cough interrupted them. Vincent had arrived with security reports. "Sorry, boss," he said, not sounding particularly apologetic. Dominic sighed, pressing one more kiss to Arya's temple before turning to business. She listened as he issued orders, his tone shifting seamlessly from tender lover to commanding boss. She marveled at the complexity of him, the ruthless leader who could order deaths without hesitation, yet treated her with such gentle consideration, the man who built an empire on violence, but made sure her coffee was perfect each morning. As his men discussed security measures, Arya realized something profound. She no longer dreamed of escape. Somewhere between that first night in the panic room and now, her captivity had transformed into belonging. His world, with all its darkness and danger, had become her world too. "Ready to head home?" he asked later, helping her to her feet. Home. The penthouse that had once felt like a prison now held different meaning. She nodded, letting him guide her through the empty club toward their waiting car. His phone buzzed again, but this time he silenced it. "Business can wait," he said quietly. "Tonight is just for us." Through the polished halls of obsidian, applause still echoed as Arya made her way backstage after her performance. 2 weeks of regular shows had given her perfect spatial awareness of the club's layout. Her fingers trailed along the wall, counting doorways until she reached the private office where Dominic handled business during her sets. Raised voices stopped her before she could knock. Vincent's usually calm tone carried an edge she'd never heard before. "The Salvatores crossed 3 blocks past their territory line. That's the second time this week." "I'm aware," Dominic's voice was glacial. "Their shipments are moving through our ports without clearance. Our guys on the docks are getting nervous. We need to send a message." "And start a war?" "Not yet." Arya knocked softly, ending their discussion. Dominic's footsteps approached. She'd learned to recognize his precise, measured stride. "There's my star," he said, tension melting from his voice as he drew her inside. She felt Vincent's presence shift, moving toward the door. "I'll have the reports on your desk by morning, boss." The door clicked shut behind him. Dominic guided her to the leather couch, his fingers absently playing with her hair as she settled against him. "Beautiful performance tonight. The crowd couldn't take their eyes off you." "But something's wrong," she said. "I heard you and Vincent." He was quiet for a long moment. "Carlo Salvatore is dying. Cancer. His son Matteo is taking control piece by piece, and he's not honoring the old agreements." "The territory lines your family's established?" "Among other things." His chest rose and fell in a heavy sigh. "Carlo and my father maintained peace for 30 years through mutual respect. Matteo, he's different, violent, unpredictable." Arya processed this, remembering details from conversations over the past weeks. "The shipments Vincent mentioned, they're moving through your ports without paying the usual fees?" "Smart girl." His lips brushed her temple. "It's a deliberate provocation. Matteo wants to prove he's more powerful than his father by taking what isn't his." Something tickled at Arya's memory. "Alessandro Romano," she said suddenly, "the conductor?" "I performed with his orchestra before," she gestured to her eyes. "He maintains connections with several prominent families, including the Salvatores. They're major donors to his arts foundation." She felt Dominic shift, interest sharpening his posture. "Go on." "He's respected, neutral, known for discretion. What if I reached out, under the pretense of discussing a charity concert?" "You'd do that?" His tone was carefully neutral. "This is my world now too," she said simply. "I want to help protect it." His kiss was fierce, possessive. "Make the call tomorrow. Vincent will arrange security." The next day, Arya sat in an upscale cafe, Alessandro's familiar cologne announcing his arrival before his booming voice did. "My dear girl, 2 years is too long." They spent the first hour genuinely discussing music, rebuilding their old rapport while Dominic's men watched from strategic positions throughout the restaurant. Finally, Arya carefully steered the conversation toward the Salvatore family's arts patronage. Such generous supporters, Alessandro sighed. Though young Matteo lacks his father's appreciation for the classics. Carlo, now there was a true music lover. It must be difficult, Arya said softly, watching a great man's legacy change so dramatically. Alessandro's silence spoke volumes. Some changes, he said finally, benefit from a moderating influence, a bridge between old ways and new. Someone respected by both sides, Arya agreed. Someone whose love of harmony extends beyond music. They parted with promises to discuss the charity concert further. Later, relaying the conversation to Dominic, Arya could hear the smile in his voice. Perfectly played, he said. Alessandro will speak to Carlo, who might still have enough influence to rein in his son. That night in their bedroom, Dominic's passion had an edge of desperation. His hands traced her body as if memorizing every inch, his kisses deeper, more possessive than ever. I never expected this, he murmured against her skin. Someone who could understand both sides of my life, the business, the violence, the responsibility, and still want me. All of you, she whispered back. The ruthless boss and the man who makes sure my coffee's perfect every morning. He groaned, pulling her closer. You're extraordinary. The way you handled Alessandro today, you've adapted to this life so naturally. Their lovemaking was intense, almost primal. Afterward, lying in his arms, Arya felt truly complete. The woman she'd been before, alone, struggling to maintain independence, seemed like a distant memory. Here, ironically, she'd found real strength, real purpose. Sleep, Dominic murmured, pulling the silk sheets over them. Early meeting tomorrow. Arya drifted off, secure in his embrace. She'd found her place in his dangerous, complex world. More than that, she'd found ways to help protect it. As sleep claimed her, she smiled, unaware of the growing stack of surveillance photos on Agent Collins' desk across town, images capturing her transformation from captive to willing partner in Dominic Costello's criminal empire. The photos showed her at Obsidian, performing while Dominic watched possessively from his private booth. At charity events, her hand on his arm as they navigated social obligations. Even today's meeting with Alessandro, seemingly innocent but loaded with implications for those who knew where to look. Each image, building Collins' case, piece by piece, while Arya slept peacefully in the arms of the man she'd chosen to love. The morning sun warmed Arya's face as she sat at Dominic's breakfast table, her fingers tracing the delicate piano charm on her new bracelet. The diamonds caught the light, creating tiny prisms she could sense dancing across her skin. Last night's memory brought a smile to her lips. Dominic's uncharacteristic nervousness as he fastened it around her wrist. I've never, he'd hesitated. I'm not good at this sort of thing. The admission had touched her deeply. The feared Mafia boss, uncertain about giving a simple gift. Alessandro's diplomatic efforts were bearing fruit. 3 days ago, he'd arranged the first meeting between neutral representatives of both families. Dominic had returned cautiously optimistic. Carlo's old guard still holds influence, he'd explained. They remember how stable things were under the old agreements. Still, security had doubled. Vincent's team conducted more frequent perimeter checks. Armed guards monitored all entrances to their building. Even Mrs. Russo was required to use new security protocols when accepting deliveries. The sharp click of heels on marble announced Mia's arrival for her scheduled visit. Arya noted the nervous energy in her friend's movements, quick, jerky steps, hands fidgeting with her purse. You look amazing, Mia said, hugging her briefly. That bracelet is gorgeous. A gift from Dominic. He's generous. Mia's voice held an odd note. Listen, I was thinking, we should have lunch tomorrow, just us girls, like old times. Arya's suspicion flickered. With everything going on, security is tight right now. That's why it needs to be just us, Mia pressed. No guards, no Vincent hovering, please. There's this quiet place downtown with private dining rooms. Totally safe, lots of witnesses. I'll have to ask Dominic. Of course. Mia's laugh held a brittle edge. Everything needs his approval now. That evening, Arya waited until Dominic was relaxed, his day's tensions easing as she played his favorite Chopin piece on the piano. When she finished, he pulled her onto his lap in the adjacent armchair. Your friend Mia seemed agitated today, he said, fingers threading through her hair. She wants to have lunch tomorrow, just us, no security. His body tensed. Absolutely not. The restaurant she suggested is very public. Arya turned to face him. And with the Salvatore talks progressing, which makes it more dangerous, not less. His voice hardened with concern. Anyone could use you to get to me. I know you're worried. She traced his jaw, feeling the muscle tick beneath her fingers. But I need to maintain some normalcy, some connections to my old life. He was quiet for a long moment. Where's this restaurant? Downtown, La Maison. They have private dining rooms. I know it. His sigh ruffled her hair. Vincent drives you. He can wait outside, but I'm having one of my men inside, watching discreetly. Thank you, she kissed him softly, for trusting me. I trust you completely. His arms tightened. It's everyone else I doubt. They spent the evening talking about the future, tentative plans that surprised them both with their domesticity. He spoke of renovating the penthouse's unused wing, adding a proper music room with perfect acoustics. She suggested hosting small recitals, combining their worlds of culture and power. Once the Salvatore situation is resolved, he mused, we could look at expanding the legitimate businesses, more nightclubs, restaurants, give you a proper venue for your talent. Going respectable, she teased. Parts of the business will always be what they are. His tone turned serious. But I want to build something lasting, something worthy of... He stopped abruptly. Worthy of what? Of us, he finished quietly. Of whatever this becomes. The next morning, Vincent helped Arya into the car, his movements precise and professional as always. Mr. Costello wants me to remind you, 1 hour maximum. I remember the rules, she smiled. And I appreciate everyone's concern. It's our job to worry, Miss Blackwood. The drive was silent, Vincent radiating disapproval at her insistence on meeting Mia alone. When they arrived, he opened her door with a sigh. Marco is already inside, positioned at the bar. He'll have eyes on your dining room. The new guy? Arya frowned. I don't really know him, which makes him perfect for surveillance. No one will connect him to us. Arya nodded, unfolding her white cane. The restaurant's host greeted her warmly, leading her to the private dining room where Mia waited. The space felt intimate, good acoustics, minimal background noise. You came? Mia's voice held relief in something else. Tension? Fear? Of course! Arya settled into her chair, arranging her napkin. Though, I admit, I'm curious why all the secrecy. She heard ice cubes clink as Mia lifted her water glass, hands shaking slightly. In the distance, the bar's ambient noise provided perfect cover for Marco's surveillance position. Everything seemed normal, yet something felt off about this meeting. Arya touched her bracelet for reassurance, the piano charm cool against her skin. Dominic's gift, his trust in letting her come, she prayed she wasn't making a mistake by being here. Marco watched from his position at the bar as the server left Arya and Mia alone in the private dining room. Through the partially open door, he could observe without being obvious. I ordered us both the salmon, Mia said, her voice trembling slightly. But before it comes, there's something important we need to discuss. Arya tilted her head, sensing the tension. What's wrong? You're shaking. I haven't been completely honest with you. Mia lowered her voice. For the past year, I've been working with the FBI. They've been investigating the Costellos, building a case against Dominic and his operations. The color drained from Arya's face. What are you saying? Agent Collins. He's been running the investigation. He knows everything, Arya. The shooting at the restaurant, your relationship with Dominic, all of it. Mia's purse rustled as she withdrew something. He wants to speak with you. No. Arya's response was immediate. I won't betray Dominic. Listen to me, Mia pleaded. Collins has surveillance photos, recordings. He can charge you as an accomplice unless you cooperate. Your relationship with Dominic, it's a unique opportunity. You could help bring down his entire organization. By spying on him? Arya's voice cracked. Using his trust against him? Here's Collins' card. Mia pressed it into Arya's hand. Just think about it. He can offer you immunity, protection, a fresh start. Marco shifted at the bar, signaling discreetly to another patron, a second security man. He'd seen enough. Without waiting to hear Arya's response, he slipped out to make the call. I can't. Arya's fingers closed around the card, but her tone was firm. What Dominic and I have, it's real. I won't help destroy him. They'll destroy you instead, Mia warned. Collins won't let this go. If you don't help them, You'll go down with Dominic when they make their move. Then I'll go down with him. Arya tucked the card into her purse, not to keep, but to destroy later. I won't pretend to approve of everything he does, but I understand him. His world isn't black and white. You're in love with him, Mia realized. God, Arya, that makes this even more dangerous. Their salmon arrived, growing cold as they sat in tense silence. Arya picked at her food, mind racing. She needed to tell Dominic about this immediately, warn him about the FBI's investigation. But by the time Vincent drove her back to the penthouse that afternoon, Dominic had already received Marco's incomplete report. Arya taking an FBI agent's card, discussing cooperation. She sensed something wrong the moment she entered. The penthouse felt cold, empty of the warmth that had grown between them. How was lunch? Dominic's voice came from his office doorway, deadly calm. We need to talk. Arya moved toward him. Mia told me about her FBI handler, about their surveillance. His tone could freeze hell. About their offer for you to inform on me. Yes, but... And you took his card. Not a question. Each word fell like an executioner's axe. To show you, to warn you. Arya reached for him, but he stepped back. I would never betray you. Yet you sat there, discussing the possibility. The crime boss had fully replaced her lover. Considering their offer. No, I rejected it immediately. I told Mia. My man saw you take the card, saw your intimate discussion with a known FBI informant. His control slipped, rage bleeding through. After everything between us, you'd throw it away for immunity? Please. Tears streamed down Arya's face. You have to believe me. I love you. I chose you. Silence stretched between them, heavy with betrayal and heartbreak. Vincent, Dominic called, his voice eerily composed. Take Miss Blackwood to the lake house compound. She'll stay there until I decide what to do about this situation. Dominic, please. Pack what you need, he cut her off. You leave within the hour. Look at me, she begged. You know me. You know my heart. For a moment, his mask cracked. Pain flashed across his features as he looked at her tear-stained face. His hand twitched, as if fighting the urge to reach for her. Then he turned away, shoulders rigid. Get her out of here, Vincent. The lake house was a fortress disguised as a luxury retreat, surrounded by armed guards and security systems. As Vincent led her inside, Arya felt the walls closing in. Not a prison, but not freedom either. A gilded cage where she'd wait for Dominic to determine her fate. She stood at the window as night fell, listening to the guards changing shifts outside. The piano charm on her bracelet felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, a reminder of trust given and shattered, of love turned to suspicion. Somewhere in the darkness, Dominic was deciding whether that love was strong enough to survive this test of faith, whether he could believe her heart over circumstantial evidence, whether the vulnerability he'd shown her would become his greatest regret. The night deepened around her as she waited, trapped between the woman who had chosen him completely and the woman he now believed might betray him, between the truth in her heart and the lies that threatened to destroy everything they'd built. Moonlight filtered through heavy curtains at the lake house, casting shadows that meant nothing to Arya but everything to the armed men watching her. Vincent maintained his position by the front door, while two others, Marco and Stefan, patrolled the perimeter with mechanical precision. The night stretched endlessly. Arya sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over silent keys. Playing felt wrong when her world was imploding. Instead, she focused on the sounds around her. Footsteps on hardwood, radio static from security communications, the subtle shift of weapons against tactical gear. Would you like some tea, Miss Blackwood? Vincent's voice carried genuine concern beneath its professional detachment. No, thank you. Her throat felt too tight for tea. Dawn arrived with chaos. First, the crackle of urgent radio transmissions. Then, Vincent's sharp intake of breath. Federal raids, he reported tersely to his men. Multiple properties. They're hitting the restaurant, the clubs, the warehouses. Arya's stomach twisted. The timing was too perfect. This had to be Mia's work. Months of information gathering, culminating in coordinated strikes. All those visits, all those carefully casual questions about Dominic's businesses, his schedules, his operations. How many arrested? She asked. At least 6 lieutenants so far. Vincent's phone buzzed constantly. They knew exactly where to hit, when to hit. The betrayal tasted bitter. While Arya had been agonizing over a single FBI business card, Mia had already sold them all out. She needed to tell Dominic, to explain. Miles away, Dominic was reaching the same conclusion. Marco, summoned for detailed questioning, finally revealed he'd left before hearing Arya's rejection of the FBI offer. The surveillance photos on his desk showed months of Mia meeting with agents long before Arya entered his world. He grabbed his phone, dialing the lake house. No answer. Again. Still nothing. "Get the car," he barked at his driver, already moving. Something was wrong. He felt it in his bones. The lake house came into view 30 minutes later, too quiet, no visible guards. Dominic drew his weapon before approaching, finding Vincent and his men unconscious, showing signs of a professional attack. No blood. They'd been taken by surprise, efficiently subdued. A cream-colored envelope sat prominently on the piano bench. Inside, elegant handwriting mocked him. "She's quite beautiful, even with the blank eyes. I can see why you've gone soft, Dominic. Come alone to discuss terms, or I'll send her back to you in pieces." "Matteo!" Dominic's rage went arctic. While federal agents dismantled his empire, Matteo Salvatore had seized this moment of chaos to strike at his heart. He worked the phones relentlessly, calling in favors, coordinating with his remaining free men while dodging FBI surveillance. Hour by hour, they pieced together intel, vehicle sightings, property records, staff movements. By sunset, they had it. Matteo's country estate, recently staffed for an unexpected guest. Meanwhile, Arya sat in an opulent bedroom, mapping every sound. Heavy footsteps, armed guards, lighter steps, house staff, conversations in Italian that drifted through vents, the creak of specific floorboards that triggered a memory. "I've performed here," she realized. 5 years ago, before losing her sight, a charity event for the Salvatore Family Foundation. She'd spent hours practicing in this very room, walking these halls, memorizing the layout to navigate between green room and stage. When a guard brought dinner, she fumbled obviously for the glass, spilling water. "I'm sorry," she whispered, playing up her helplessness. "Everything's so unfamiliar." "Just clean it up," he muttered, already bored with babysitting a blind woman. As night fell, the guards grew complacent. They talked freely, played cards in the hallway, convinced their captive was too disabled to attempt escape. They didn't understand how Arya's world worked, how sound painted pictures, how memory created maps, how other senses filled the void of sight. She waited until the night shift change, when attention wavered. The door wasn't even locked. Why bother restraining a blind woman? Moving silently, she slipped into the hallway. Left turn, 20 steps. Right turn at the Ming vase on its marble pedestal. The service corridor would be here. Yes, there was the subtle change in flooring from carpet to tile. She pressed against the wall, listening intently. Distant gunfire erupted from the property's edge, shouts in Italian, running feet. Somewhere in the darkness, Dominic had arrived, bringing vengeance with him. Arya forced herself to stay focused. The service corridor branched ahead, left toward the kitchens, right toward a staff exit she remembered. Every sound could mean discovery or salvation. She held her breath, calculating her next move while Dominic's assault team carved a bloody path through the estate's defenses. She could almost taste freedom. Almost. But one wrong turn, one misremembered detail, could prove fatal. She pressed deeper into the shadows, balancing between memory and present reality, while death stalked the halls in her name. Arya moved silently across marble floors in pre-dawn light. Every shadow concealed danger, but darkness was her element. She pressed against a wall as boots echoed through corridors. "Find her," Matteo's voice carried from above. "The blind bitch couldn't have gone far." Air currents revealed an open window, but approaching footsteps forced her retreat. She counted steps, navigating by memory. 20 paces, right turn at the temperature change marking the conservatory. Ferns confirmed her location. Distant. Gunfire erupted, followed by screams. Dominic advanced methodically. "Where is she?" His cold voice carried through a window. A whimpered response ended with a gunshot. Arya's heart raced as search parties converged. She slipped into an alcove as guards rushed past, radios reporting Dominic's deadly progress. She found a storage room as Matteo approached with guards. "Costello's getting closer," reported a guard. "Perfect," Matteo replied. "Once he sees her on her knees, he'll surrender. After we deal with him, dump her in the lake. Tragic accident." Arya waited before emerging, heading for the kitchen's exterior access. She followed the floor's slope, using air currents to navigate until reaching the kitchen. Dominic's cologne reached her seconds before his hands gripped her shoulders. "Arya," he said, voice rough. "When I saw the lake house, you came for me. Always. I was wrong to doubt you. Mia had been informing for months. I would never betray you, not after everything. I love you, he confessed. You're the only one who sees me without fear or agenda. Gunfire interrupted. Dominic shielded her behind a counter, returning fire before guiding her toward a service exit. They emerged as Matteo called from above. The monster and his blind beauty. Guards surrounded them as Dominic shielded Arya, promising, You're dead, Salvatore. Love makes you weak, Matteo taunted. Arya sensed the sniper's laser sight and pushed Dominic aside. The bullet meant for him struck her shoulder. Dominic roared, firing repeatedly as his men joined the assault. He advanced on Matteo, whose bravado crumbled as he fired wildly before emptying his gun. Dominic caught him, whispering, You wanted my attention. You have it. Matteo's neck snapped as the remaining gunman fell. Dominic gathered Arya carefully. Stay with me, Angel. Not going anywhere, she whispered. I see you too clearly to let go now. Heavy boots thundered through the mansion as federal agents breached every entrance. Dominic hunched protectively over Arya, his hands pressed against her wound, while his remaining men formed a defensive circle. The agents surged into the great hall, weapons raised, then froze at a commanding voice. Hold your fire! Agent Collins strode through the chaos, his presence parting the sea of tactical gear. Medical team now! Dominic's eyes narrowed with suspicion as paramedics rushed forward. What game are you playing, Collins? No game. Collins surveyed the carnage, pausing at Matteo's broken form. You just eliminated our biggest target. The medics worked efficiently around Dominic, who refused to release Arya completely. She gripped his sleeve weakly, her breathing shallow but steady. Stay, she whispered. The Salvatore operation went beyond typical family business, Collins continued, holstering his weapon. Human trafficking, particularly minors. We've been building a case for years. Dominic's jaw clenched. I don't touch that filth. We know. Collins pulled a thick file from his jacket. Your explicit refusal to participate in their trafficking routes, even when it cost you profitable shipping lanes. The evidence is extensive. The medics had stabilized Arya enough for transport. As they prepared to move her, Collins laid out his proposition. The Salvatore organization is finished. Their associates will scatter, looking for new alliances. We want them all. And, Dominic's voice was ice, full immunity for you and your core organization. In exchange, you transition to legitimate operations and testify against remaining Salvatore associates. Collins glanced at Arya. Your father built an empire in both worlds. You've already expanded the legal side significantly. Dominic studied Arya's pale face, remembering every moment since she entered his life. The way she challenged him, saw through his defenses, made him question long-held beliefs about power and control. Her music had awakened something he'd thought died with his mother, the ability to feel beauty amid darkness. If I refuse, he asked quietly, then we build our case the hard way. It might take years, but eventually. Collins shrugged. She'd wait for you, I suspect. But why make her? The medics began moving Arya toward the waiting ambulance. Her fingers slipped from Dominic's sleeve. Time to choose, Costello. Your father's way or your own path. Dominic straightened, decision crystallizing. I'll need guarantees, written terms, my people protected. Done. Collins pulled out his phone. Our attorneys are standing by. Sir, Vincent approached cautiously. The men are waiting for orders. Dominic's gaze followed Arya's stretcher. Stand down, call our lawyers, we're restructuring. The next hours passed in a blur of paperwork and preliminary statements. Dominic signed the immunity deal in Arya's hospital room, her steady breathing providing counterpoint to the scratch of his pen. By morning, news of the Salvatore takedown and Costello cooperation agreement dominated headlines. 1 year later, sunlight streamed through tall windows as young musicians took their places on the Blackwood Institute stage. The renovated building bore little resemblance to the rundown apartment complex it had been. Now state-of-the-art facilities served visually impaired students from across the country. Arya moved confidently among her students, adjusting posture here, offering encouragement there. Her shoulder had healed cleanly, leaving only a small scar that Dominic kissed each night. She wore a tailored blue dress that complemented the modernized performance space. From the back of the hall, Dominic watched with pride. The transition hadn't been simple. Some old associates had resisted change, requiring firm reminders of where true power lay. But legitimate success had proven even more profitable than criminal enterprise. The Costello name now represented philanthropy and arts patronage alongside their business ventures. The student recital proceeded beautifully, each young musician demonstrating remarkable talent. When they finished, applause filled the hall. Aria approached the piano for her traditional closing performance. "This piece tells a story," she said softly into the microphone. "About light penetrating darkness, about seeing with more than eyes, about love transforming everything it touches." Her fingers touched the keys, and their story poured forth in notes of passion and pain, danger and devotion. The melody spoke of gunshots and tender touches, of fear and trust, of two souls finding completion in unlikely circumstances. As the final notes faded, Aria sensed Dominic's approach. His familiar footsteps crossed the stage, then paused beside the bench. When his knee touched the floor, her breath caught. "You taught me to see beyond power to possibility," he said, taking her hand. "To trust beyond suspicion, to love beyond possession." His fingers slipped a ring onto hers. "My darkness will always yield to your light because you showed me a better path. Marry me?" Tears spilled down Aria's cheeks as she touched his face, seeing his expression through her fingertips as she had learned to read every nuance of his moods. In his features, she found the man who had chosen love over empire, who had remade himself and his world for their shared future. Their kiss drew fresh applause from the audience, but they were lost in their private symphony, a duet of shadow and illumination, perfectly balanced at last,